communities. You will agree with me that this is very apt and relevant topic for Nigeria and most part of the world. From Professor Bunza's pedigree, he is well placed to speak to us on security and harmony in the Sokoto Caliphate. Without wasting too much of our time in the introduction, because if I say I will continue talking about Professor Bunza, I will spend most of the time allotted. I will now call upon Professor Bunza to make his presentation in 45 minutes. And I assure you, we will learn a lot because I've already had a peep of the paper. Over to Professor Bunza. Thank you. Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Rahmatullah.
Is Professor Bunza with us? Assalamu alaikum, Professor.
Actually, he's with us, but I'm afraid he's having a problem with his audio.
Is the NC close? Professor Salis Shehu, are you with us? Assalamu alaikum. That's technology for us. We have not yet perfected it. So please, let's exercise some patience. We can hear some sounds, but Professor has not yet been able to rectify . Mala Nabil, can you please unmute Professor Salis Shehu? Dr. Nabil?
We are switching it now. He's going to start speaking, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Professor, Bismillah. Assalamu alaikum, Professor. Well, Nabil, we're still having problem.
Yes, like his network is fluctuated. I don't know.
Can you unmute the NC? Okay, alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah.
Hello.
Hello, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. Am I allowed? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
can I continue now?
Yes,
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 sir.
Professor.
Okay, thank you.
Malam
So,
Nabil, unmute all of us to give him
I think
more
it's better.
clarity. Go ahead, Professor.
Okay, thank you. Hello.
Salam alaikum.
Prof,
Go
I
ahead,
suggest you use.
Professor.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum. This is the host. Please, I suggest you use the phone for both the volume, the sound and the video, please.
Okay.
Maybe you can just start the computer as
Okay.
initially arranged. Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes, that's okay.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Aha.
Hear you, sir.
Now we can see you and we can hear you, sir.
But I cannot see you, and I cannot hear you.
But we can hear you, Professor. Continue.
Okay. Thank you, Professor, for the introduction. Like you have rightly mentioned, our discussion today on security and harmony in the Sokoto Caliphate, model for peaceful coexistence in contemporary multicultural African nations and the communities. Before I make my little contribution to this topic, I think it will not be out of place first to appreciate His Eminence, Sultan of Dr. Saad Abubakar, for giving us able leadership of the Caliphate today that we remain proud of. We also wish to appreciate him for being a worthy ambassador the Sokoto Caliphate has for the 21st century. The Triple IT will also need to be commended for taking the lead with this wonderful initiative for this lecture series. Our mentor, our teacher, Malam Ibrahim Sulaiman, who presented his paper last week, we appreciate him for giving us a guide. I could remember when he published his 2 books on the Sokoto Caliphate in 1987, myself and the convener, Professor Salisu Shehu, was struggling to go for our national service in Bauchi. And those invaluable materials and literature he pioneered in the history of Sokoto Caliphate provide us a sound background and foundation for understanding the history of the Sokoto Caliphate. Our topic today, security and harmony, like we have in the slides. The issue of security and harmony has remained a problem, not only to African nations, but to all nations, developed and undeveloped. I'm sure if the issue of security and harmony has been properly addressed, the relevance of this presentation today and the seeking for the model and the alternative approach of the Sokoto Caliphate will not have been relevant. We have seen the world today is really engulfed into this very serious problem. The issue of security and harmony, one can say the world today, in spite of all the technological and the scientific advancement and inventions, the issue of peace and harmony has still remained a mirage. So the world is searching. The world is exploring available options and models. Since basically one can adjudge that what we have today has failed. So that's what brought us to take the Sokoto Caliphate model, assess it, analyze it, examine it, and see how feasible, how practicable those models will be for the current African nations and the globe and the world at large. Sokoto Caliphate indeed, by its establishment and emergence, was confronted with these very critical issues of security and harmony. Primarily, the issue of the issue of security is very important, as it was during the time, because Sokoto Caliphate emerged amidst stronger nations. Its territories were formerly territories of Gobir, Kebi, and Zafar kingdoms. Therefore, the issue of internal and external security was very, very paramount in the philosophy and ideology of the establishment of the Sokoto Caliphate. Similarly, the issue of harmony was also very, very important, because for the first time in the central blooded Sudan, to have a state which was not based on any tribal or ethnic affiliation. The Nupe, Yoruba, the Kanawa, Kano, Daura is for the Daurawa people, Katsina for Katsinawa, Gobir for Gobirawa, Kebi for Kabawa, and the rest. So all these peoples of diverse cultural, traditional, religious, and historical backgrounds were now housed under the same umbrella for the first time under one single leadership. Therefore, the challenge of harmony, how to harmonize these different and diverse people into one single political entity, was also a very serious challenge. So our discussion now will look into how and which or what were the mechanisms, what were the method and the methodology that were applied by the Sokoto Caliphate to address these two critical issues of security and harmony, to allow it to survive for over a century and continue up till today, in spite of troubles and tribulations associated with colonialism and other historical eventualities. So on the issue of internal security, that is under security, like we mentioned earlier, we have the issue of internal as well as external. So in the internal security, we refer to literally what we mean as keeping the peace within the borders, within the caliphate. Relationship between person and the person. Relationship between individuals. Peace between individuals. Security between individuals in a given state. And those issues were like the issue of armed robbery, banditry, thuggery, and so many other issues. So what Sokoto Caliphate did was first and foremost not to directly approach the problem, but to go to the root. Because whenever you have a problem, so the best and lasting solution to it is to address the root cause of the problem. So what were the problems of social, political unrest? What were the cause of issues related to ethnic chauvinism, extremism in religion, intolerance, and several other things of this nature? One, on the issue of internal security, what Sokoto Caliphate did, and they provided a what was called a case study, because for each of these problems, they identified an area which they will practice, which they will experiment their own philosophy, their own paradigm, to see how workable that will be. In this regard, Katsina served as a case study, because one, there was civil unrest in Katsina, there were high rate of banditry in Katsina, there were high rates of misunderstanding between government and the other government organs, like judges. You have the emergence of Al-Qalay, who are not happy with what government at the time was doing. And also you have the crisis between Malaman Kawi and the Malaman Birni. At the same time, you have the problem associated with the establishment of Maradi and the Magaram and the remnant of the Korau family. So if you observe, you have quite, a complex situation in Katsina, which is Sokoto Caliphate leadership, especially under the leadership of Sultan Muhammad Bello, they identified that and said, okay, let us put this as a case study and see how we can solve the problem. And unlike any other emirate, it was only in Katsina that there were, approved 3 flag bearers: Umarun Dallaji, Malam na Alhaji, and Umarun Dumyawa. Both 3 got approval from Shehu to go to Katsina or to remain in Katsina and worked for the, advancement of jihad there. So there were also misunderstanding in between them as leaders and also in between their followers. So from here, you can have a very good, case study, which the Sokoto, after experimenting, then the same was applied to other areas. So in that regard, Sultan Muhammad Bello visited the area several times because of the crisis in Katsina, internal conflict, internal crisis, insecurity in Katsina. So Sultan Muhammad Bello traveled in person after sending delegations and envoys. He went himself to see how to solve those problems. He attempted. What he did was first and foremost to address the issue of poverty, to address the issue of hunger, to address the issue of unemployment, to address the issue of a lack of social amenity among the people, at least to make people happy. If you read the introduction of Usulu As-Siyasa of Sultan Muhammad Bello, you will see where he identified these issues. And he said, as a command, directives to Umar Ndalaje that in order to address these problems, he should create religious and social jobs, that is vacancies for his subject. He should train manufacturers and be concerned about professionals who are necessary for the well-being of the people. We discuss about the issue of professionals. Because while addressing the issue of judges, the issue of ulama, they are professionals. So at the same time now, if we are addressing the problem of insecurity, the problem of instability, the problems of internal, conflict and the problems, then we must have to take two approaches. First approach for the masses, the other approach for the professionals. So also should provide training and the support for farmers, smithers, tailors, butchers, carpenters, and the rest. So by this enumeration, what we are having here is that a maintenance and trying to provide jobs for the teeming populace, was very, very important in addressing the problem. If that is done, Muhammad Bello added that they should also create infrastructure in both small towns and the big cities, constructing walls, roads, bridges, and taking good care of markets, roads, and the provision of all social infrastructure so that the basic structure system of the society will be in place. In the issue of morality, he said also, they should build mosques and fill them with prayer and worship, appoint judges and teachers, and arrange for the payment of their stipends, appoint educators and the children and the preachers, and inspectors of public moral, that is to establish an agency for the enforcement of morality. That is an agency that will serve as a watchdog in order to apprehend the evildoers and to instill morality and the proper discipline in the society. So this, in the opinion of Sultan Muhammad Bello, would serve as a very important tool in addressing the issue of insecurity. You have to make people as much as possible within the available resources of the state to be happy and to feel belong to the government. On the issue of professionals, whenever you have in a state system, the ulama, that is the academics, lawyers and the judges, as well as other professionals should be given prominence, should not be left, in melancholy. They should be supported, they should be assisted by the government. And that will help very seriously in making them contribute their best for the success of government and for ensuring security. In this aspect of professional, Sultan Muhammad Bello himself presided over these proceedings in Katsina. He invited all the malamais, the malaman birni, the malaman kauye, and he created an avenue for them for improvement of their social and economic statuses. At least what our teacher, Yusuf Bala Usman, informed us in his book, Transformation of Katsina, that Sultan Muhammad Bello, before leaving Katsina, he established some of the malamai in those positions, which is requested. They were appropriately placed in government and ordered that grant of waqf land be given to each of them in the Karkara around the Birni. the Malaman Tsohuwar Kasuwa led by Malam Ladan bin Usman, who was well known to Bello, were granted land at Kafi and the Tsunswa. Land was granted to Malaman Gafai at Jino and Nangohi, the Malaman Gambarawa around the Dusun Safe, and Ajua, the Malaman Makurdi around their settlement. One of the Malam Abakar Ankande was among the Qadis judges appointed by Amirul Mu'minin Sultan Muhammad Bello in order to address the problem of Katsina. So what we are trying to say here is that you must have to take it from both directions. Military approach should not be applied first when addressing internal security. What you should be first put in place is to build the confidence of people, to build people's confidence in the government, and also provide what they think government should provide for them. So in that regard, after putting these two things on ground, then the issue of using force, first using intelligence, because Sultan Muhammad said that whenever you have the challenge of insecurity, before you send force, you should have to first send, intelligence together and provide you with appropriate and effective information on the state of affairs, then before you apply. Because if you apply force before intelligent information, then it will be, sometimes you will be shooting in the dark without, hitting the target. So he said, you should first send and gather relevant information, and then the third option, then that is the last resort, then you send for military. So in this internal security, that's what Sultan Muhammad Bello experimented in Katsina, and it proved efficacious and effective. Then the same was applied to other areas or other emirates in the Caliphate. Then the second aspect in the security of the Sokoto Caliphate was external security. So this external security, unlike the internal security, was concerned more with issues of challenges, not within the borders, but without, that is outside the borders. Outside the borders. And that challenge of security can be a threat to economy, can be military aggression, from outside. So in this regard, they identified this very important issue, and they applied 4, different mechanisms. One, like we identified earlier, that the Sokoto Caliphate first established itself and its seat of power in 1805, April 15, in the land of Kebbi. Now the problem is where in Kebbi? How could Kebbi, with all the strong alliances with Gobir, with Zamfara, with Yauri, and several other kingdoms, will allow this newly established power to survive? First, they tried as much as they could, in spite of the pressure, that is economic pressure. They tried to source and they established themselves as a sound and a strong military power. One, by providing for the military whatever was needed at the time in terms of operation, in terms of training, and in terms of platforms, whatever you can call that platform. They tried, to support and provide that. And at the same time, they were also very conscious in trying to improve and provide the welfare, take care of the welfare of the military. And also, they exploited reliable intelligence support. Having that very clear, they went into the second segment of security. They came up with an initiative or what they call the rebut system. Rebut defense initiative, one was also divided into 3 parts. One, sighting of the central caliphate settlement were cited where natural defense system like mountains, like rivers and the valleys, at least to provide natural security. One will understand, will see the position of Gondu, where Gondu is situated, and also where Wurno is situated. Secondly, under this item, they also try to establish satellite military zones, military towns, to provide support and security to the center. If you take the example of Gondu, if you take the example of Sokoto, you will see quite impressive military strategy, security strategy, in order to abate any expected or unexpected external aggression. In Sokoto, for example, the establishment of towns such as Dange and the Shuni, establishments of Raba, establishment of cities like Wurno, establishment of various areas, Shagari, Bodinga, so that from wherever external aggression will come, the military satellite camp or town that was established will be able to confront that external aggression before the center prepares for that. Under this issue also, the third item is trying to establish security or military posts in all the borders of the caliphate. You take the example of Gande, you take the example of Sanyina, you take the example of Goronyo and several others, so that from this angle of Sanyina, whatever will come from the Kabi kingdom in terms of aggression, they will be able to address it and inform the center so that they will prepare for a more, a powerful intervention. The same way in Gande, the same way at Wurno, whatever will come from the Gobir, it will have to pass through there so that they will prepare and inform the center in good time. So you have this very important issue. Number 4, again, under this was providing walls for the fortification of the cities. The third item was the issue of diplomacy. And one will see that this issue of diplomacy, as far as Sokoto Caliphate was concerned, were the topmost, were the best mechanism that worked. One, they knew the hostility between Sokoto Caliphate and Kebi, hostility between Sokoto Caliphate and Gobir, hostility between Sokoto Caliphate and Zamfara. And in all this, there were several and lingering, encounters between them. But they tried to forge diplomatic relations. In Kebi, for example, they came up with use of carrot and stick. If circumstances warrant going to war, fine and good. If circumstance warrant using diplomacy, that was also the best option. So they did that, and from 1860s up to the present moment, the use of diplomacy really worked, and the harmony and the peaceful coexistence between those two, independent states was secured. The example of Borno, after the incorporation of Katsina, incorporation of Kano, incorporation of Daura into the fold of the Sokoto Caliphate, now the borders of the Sokoto Caliphate became extended. One in the eastern angle to Borno. So what happened? Borno at the time was over 1,000 years, the Safawa dynasty. So Sokoto Caliphate applied issue of diplomacy after some little, military encounters, some very few encounters. Then there was also the use of diplomacy and the use of intellectual, debate to address the problem. The same way in the state of Ahir, the same way in the state of Maradi, and thus worked very well. In some of the terms of the agreement, one can understand that the caliphate went into signed treaties, peace accords, highly articulated. Some of them, like you can see, that after all the military encounters, now after proving the military prowess and the capacity and the capability of the Sokoto Caliphate, now all those powers now will come to recognize Sokoto Caliphate as an independent sovereign state. So they accepted to sign an accord of peace with her. Some of the accords, especially items in the accord in the peace treaty, which was referred as Lafayette Toga, you have accepted that item that Kebi should be independent. That is, Kebi Kingdom should be independent. Neither a state under Gondu or state under Sokoto. So it should remain, it should have its independence. But this second one, all the towns then held by Kebawa should remain under Argungu. So now you can see those areas, areas conquered by Gondu or by the Sokoto Caliphate generally will remain under the control of Gondu and the Sokoto, while the remaining areas under the control of Kebi should remain under Kebi. The same thing one can see in the relation between Gondu, Kebi, and the Doso, which we address somewhere. So it's really very, very important to understand that in the issue of external security, the issue of military approach, military option that is using force, as far as Sokoto Caliphate is concerned, was the last resort. But what it paid was the use of diplomacy. So this is very important, and it is really clear that in spite of the confederation nature of the caliphate, each emirate was allowed to operate, sponsor, and command its own army. However, the issue of security was very, very paramount, and was an area which one can say by historical records, Sokoto Caliphate succeeded very, very clearly. The issue of harmony, like we identified earlier, for the first time, you have the Hausa, the Yoruba, Nupe, the Kabawa, the Gobirawa, the Kanawa, the Katsinawa, the Daurawa, and all other tribes of West Africa now forming one single state. That takes us into this issue of harmony and stability. It is very, very important to note that they succeeded in stabilizing internally the fabric of the caliphate, one by leading by example. They tried their best to live not flamboyant life. That is, they tried to identify themselves with the masses. In spite of the fact that they are in control of power, they were in control of resources, public treasury was under their control, but they refused to lavishly spend out of that trust. One can see in most books that Sultan Muhammad Bello shows one video on the other side and Abdullah on the other side, even arguing on the type of dress they should wear, whether they should wear the al-kebba, whether they should appear gorgeous, or whether they should go down and dress like all other commoners, and not to in any way misuse the resources for their own selfish self-aggrandizement. So if the followers, if the people, if the masses identify you as such, then you have built a solid foundation for stability and trust, for internal harmony. Secondly, they tried the best they could to see that they did not discriminate between one segment of people, that is either social class or political class or tribal or ethnic entities. They tried the best they could, although they identified that they were Fulani and they were Torope by a clan. But as far as they are concerned, the Torope, the Fulani, the Toronkawa, and everybody, every other one, were one and the same. What will distinguish a Yoruba man, a Nufe man, and a Batoranke is the piety, the knowledge, the professionalism, and several other things, the other, qualities he possesses, not where he belongs to. So in that regard, they fought and they campaigned, and that was the very reason why they won the support of all and sundry in this region, not because of any tribal appeal. So therefore, from here, one can see and identify the fallacy of calling or identifying, the movement, the jihad, or even the caliphate as Fulani jihad, or Fulani caliphate, or Fulani empire, or Fulani this, or Fulani that. Never. From the onset, from the formative period, from the consolidation period, up to the time that is of British intervention, what they remained was what they remained, what they earlier initiated for purifying the religion of Islam and providing or, fighting for the freedom of the oppressed, cutting across different, geographical, ethnic, or tribal backgrounds. So it's very interesting to look at what Abdullah Danfodio said in Tazinu al-Waraka, where he was saying that we are an army victorious in Islam, and we are proud of nothing but that. This is a book that was written under the directives of Sheikh Usmanu Danfodio. Sheikh Usmanu Danfodio directed Mawlana Abdullahi to write as early as 1786. Abdullahi, look, write whatever we are doing, document it. Say what was our ideology, what will be our philosophy, where I did write them down so that somebody
Good. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I don't know if the speaker is with us, Professor Mukhtar Umar.
hello.
No, assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
Yeah, I think we had a network problem, but now you are back.
You are back. I'm already on. Hello. Okay. So that's regarding ethnic tribal issues. So on the religion also, it's very amazing to understand that in spite of the fact that the Sokoto Caliphate was established on the basis of religion, but the issue of extremism, that is why Abdullahi Sheikh Danfodio wrote a book warning the extremists and also warning the people who compromise the religion. So one should be, in the middle course. So interreligious relations, one can see very clearly the set of the Sokoto Caliphate was to allow each and everyone practice his own religion. Because without Islam in the purview of the Sokoto Jihad leaders, in the paradigm which is established, was a conviction. If you are not convinced, if you practice, it's null and void. So the issue of compulsion will not be there. It will not work. So the issue is people should be given appropriate knowledge, should not be extremists in practice, should not be extremists in their relationship between one another in terms of religion. So these are some of the mechanisms to checkmate the problems of intra as well as inter-religious, issues. That was why Sheikh Usmanu Danfodio in his book, Kitab Wujub al-Hijra al-Ibad, he was warning that not only allowing the non-Muslims to practice their religion, no, even their property, their wealth. He said, know that a deposit left with us by non-Muslim persons who had been granted an amana, that is guarantee of protection by this state, by the caliphate, should be sent to him wherever he may be. Even if he had fought against the Muslims, his property must be protected and sent to him. This is a very, very important clause. And you have it in several books of Abdullah Fodio, Muhammad Bello, and the Sheikh Usmanu Danfodio, trying to establish and show how, caliphal policy was with regard to inter-religious relations. That was the reason why, in appreciation of that, Professor Ismail Balogun was saying that these mechanisms and the policies accounted for Sheikh Usmanu Danfodio's leniency and tolerance, where others were unacceptably strict, bordering on seeming harshness. He said it must be stated that it was his middle of the way attitude to life and to all around him that won him the heart of millions of his adherents. That indeed was the greatest heritage that Usman Danfodio and the Sokoto Caliphate had bequeathed to the world. This very important to note that internally, Shehu tried to establish understanding in between Muslims themselves and also between Muslims and non-Muslims. That was the reason why in the understanding of the religion itself, they tried to form a miniature ummah in the account of Abdurrahman. He wrote a book which he called Tartib al-Ashab. In Tartib al-Ashab, Sheikh Abdurrahman was the confidant of Abdullah Fodio, identified over 700 students who he said moved when Abdullah moved, stayed where he stayed. That means to say that they were very, very close disciples of Abdullah Fodio. One of the amazing issue or aspect, he identified all of them with his affiliations. One can find the Gobirawa in the school, the Kabawa in the school, the Zamfarawa in the school, the Kanuri, the Bari in the school, and also people as far as Ghana, as far as Mali, as far as Burkina Faso, and as far as Sudan, forming that group, trying to show that yes, the type of model, the political, the religious model they were able to establish was borderless in terms of ethnic and regional geography. The only identity is Islam, is the religion, is the capacity, is the competence, and nothing more than that. So that was the very reason why one can find very interesting epochs that up to the time of colonial occupation, those legacies were still in practice. In 1903, when Muhammad Ali was removed from power in Gwandu as Sarkin Gwandu, because he refused to succumb to the British, power. They asked him to take any other person, only one confidant, and he was exiled to Lokoja. To the surprise of the colonial officers, he chose to go on exile with a Nupe man. Enupe. So if you take the example of Sokoto, you have the Gobirawa quarters, you have the Kabawa quarters, you have the Nupawa quarters, you have the Kanawa quarters, you have all other quarters of people coming to form the Sokoto. So it's not owned by Hausa, it's not owned by the Fulani. There's something in Gwandu. You go to Gwandu, for example, you see the Unguwar Dakarkari, Unguwar Kabawa, Unguwar Hausawa, Unguwar, whatever, all the other tribes, just to show, after seeing it in literature, you should also see it practical, that yes, they practicalize what they theorized. So in this regard, one very clearly would see that they succeeded really in forging harmony and stability as well as security in the operation of the statecraft in the Sokoto Caliphate. And one most very interesting issue is that throughout the 100 years of the existence of the Sokoto Caliphate before British occupation, there was no civil war. What happened in Kano was not a civil war. It was the same ideology which was instilled by the Sokoto Caliphate leaders of liberty and the freedom of speech. Appointment of a leader, which they don't want, yes, they said you are free. Abdullah disagreed with Muhammad Bello. Abdullah disagreed with Shehu. He loudly and openly pronounced it, and he wrote it. So it's the same. If the Caliphate leadership, at whatever level, did something or performed something or appointed somebody who was not acceptable by the people, the Caliphate leadership trained them to say no. So one can see the harmony, the understanding that as a result of that, if you look at the opening chapter of Minority Report by Willing, we see that he really commended the Sokoto Caliphate integration, a project, which he said was the very reason why the North was a bloc, was a unified political, cultural, social, and religious entity as a result of the legacy of the Sokoto Caliphate. Now, this one can mention them on and on and on and on. So now in practical sense, how could African nations and communities benefit from this wealth of legacies left behind by the Sokoto Caliphate in addressing the multifarious problems? Really, African nations issue of justice, the issue of prudence,
Assalamu alaikum. It seems like the speaker is not with us. I think we're having some problem from his side.
Hello? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, so we are making conclusion. So we are saying that in terms of issue of addressing security challenges, forging harmony and stability, African nations do have quite enormous of the legacies of the Sokoto Caliphate to emulate in addressing their problems. And those who are practicable, very feasible, and very, very clear. So having one single block, political entities named Sokoto Caliphate and survived with less, very, very minimal internal problems would attest to the fact that yes, they had put mechanisms feasible and practicable in place. Like we were saying, Captain Clapperton was in Sokoto. So he wrote his report after going through, examining, exploring. Then he gave us an account of security situation within his time of visit. He said, one, the laws of the Quran were in his embellished time so strictly put in force that the whole country, when not in a state of war, was so well regulated that it is a common saying that a woman might travel from one angle of the caliphate to the other, carrying a casket of gold without fear. That is without fear of armed robbers, without fear of thieves, without fear of anything, peaceful. So this is one of the legacies of the Sokoto Caliphate. So as we are saying, in order to abate and to bring an end to the internal squabbles, conflict, security challenges that we face today, in all African nations, no, in all nations of the world, the example of Sokoto Caliphate accounted above, if put in place, if applied or experimented, will go a long way in providing another option and alternative for peace and harmony to our nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Now I'm going to hand over to the moderator. I don't know whether Prof Aisha is with us now.
Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Professor Aisha has left, and she requested me to take over. Are you with me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we will now go to the question and answer session. Before we do that, let me congratulate Professor Bunza, my friend and my teacher, for this very wonderful presentation. Although I have had serious network challenges, I got just about 1/8 of his presentation. Wallahi, it was really bad from my own end.
Yeah.
So I will not be competent enough to summarize his presentation or even make comments. But in order to give honor to whom honor is due and to respect scholarship and age also, I would like to request Professor Atahiru Jega to honor us by giving a few words before we proceed. Professor Tahir Jega, if he is with me or with us, please, this is a request, an earnest request for your intervention, sir. Dr. Nabil, would you please unmute Professor Jega?
Muted already. He's unmuted.
Oh, all right. Professor Jega? Assalamu alaikum, Prof. Has he left? Okay.
He's unmuted, but I don't know what happened. He's not speaking.
He's there speaking, but we cannot hear him. I can see Dr. Ali Dairi saying he's there speaking. Oh my God.
Okay.
Can anyone hear Professor Jega? Oh, he's speaking, but
Actually, we can't hear him.
wallahi, we can't hear him. Prof, have you unmuted yourself? Go ahead, Prof. Maybe. Oh my God. Subhanallah. We can't hear, sir. Oh, it's bad. Maybe the network, there's network challenge from your own end, sir. Have you really unmuted him, Nabil?
Yes, I have unmuted him. Even his video is also on.
Yeah,
so
his video is on.
I don't know really.
So it's really sad that we will miss Prof's comments. Maybe Prof will get back to you later. It's sad we cannot get Professor Jiga's voice.
Yeah.
Okay. Hello? Oh, Professor Jiga, you are still muted. You have not unmuted yourself. Or maybe Nabil.
No, actually, it's not from
Professor
me.
Jiga is unmuted.
Maybe it's from.
Yeah, it's not.
His, yeah, it's from his system. I think,
Maybe
yeah.
maybe we'll get back to him later. Maybe we'll get back to him later. Okay. There is a question. There is a question that was asked by. Okay. Somebody advised that Professor Jega may leave and rejoin. May log out and then log in again. Okay? If Professor Jega has had that, you may log out, then log in again, then we may get your voice, inshallah. There is a question that was asked by Imam Said Mukhtar from Lagos, I'm from Ghana. Let me read the question. That what is the position? What was the position of the Sokoto Caliphate on slavery generally and black slavery in particular? Particularly when a lot of discussions these days hover on the facts related to the sources of social discrimination and racism. In fact, some writings associated Islam to the success of black slavery in Africa. Reference can be made to a statement by the Guinea author Professor Falun Gong. Would Professor Mukhtar Bunza have anything to say on this?
Yes. Very little. My knowledge is not very well sufficient on this. Really, Paul Lovejoy did some works on the issue of slavery. That is the issue of both domestic as well as non-domestic aspect of slavery. But it's very important. One should look first as a student of history to the literature written by the jihadists themselves. So if you take Infaq al-Maysur, fi Tarikh Bilad al-Tukrur, one will find a portion where Sultan Muhammad Bello was writing against slavery, especially selling slaves down to the Yoruba land, which of course will be transmitted to the coast for a transatlantic slave trade. He was really against the trade, took less of, selling those slaves to non-Muslims. He wrote very clearly on that. On the issue of slavery generally, the Sokoto Caliphate rely on what was provided by the Sharia. Whatever is the stand of the Sharia on slaves, that is in the Quran and Hadith, and the Sharia generally was the position of the Sokoto Caliphate. One is allowed, but allowed in which sense? I'm not a jurist, I'm a student of history, but one can say ways and the means through which Sharia, open gates for freedom of slaves were the same as, put in place by the Sokoto Jihad leaders, freeing them, giving them freedom, and several other things. So in my opinion, as far as the aspect of slavery, which my brother from Ghana was referring to, especially as he mentioned, one of our friends and colleagues, Falun Gong professor of in the US, as you are referring to this issue of slavery, especially blacks and selling slaves to, to the coast, and also taking them to US or other part of Europe. So that's very, very clearly the Caliphate leaders, especially Sultan Muhammad Bello, wrote against that and discouraging, in that regard. I think this very little.
Thank you so much. Can we have Professor Atahir Jega now? But before he speaks, let me recognize Professor Isa Menshanu and Professor Mansur Sokoto, who have also joined. Prof, you can have the floor. After Prof's comment, there is another question which is also very important. I would like the speaker to say something about it. So please unmute Professor Atahir Jega. Dr. Nabil? Dr. Nabil? Dr. Nabil? Please unmute.
Okay, sir.
Unmute. Oh my God.
Sir, he has been unmuted.
All right. Prof, you have been unmuted once again. Maybe, Prof, you are using earphone. Are you using earphone on your phone? Perhaps the earphone may be the...
Hello?
Okay. Okay. Your voice has started coming up.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you, sir.
Yes,
Okay.
sir, we
What's
can
the
hear
earphone?
Okay. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Good
you.
afternoon or evening to you all. I thank you for this opportunity to say a few words. First of all, I would like to commend the Triple IT for organizing this series of discussions. And I would also specifically like to commend Professor Bunza, Mukhtar Bunza, for his presentation today. In spite of the technology challenges, I have been able to follow his presentation. I think there is no doubt that from his presentation, there is a lot that can be learned from the good leadership that the founders of the Sokoto Caliphate provided establishing the caliphate in terms of holding harmony and mutual coexistence. And obviously, the issues he mentioned about leadership, humility in leadership, the deliberate effort to generate ideas and to use them in building a community based on the sound principles of the Islamic religion are definitely commendable efforts. I think what distinguished that leadership was its knowledge, its humility, its reliance on ideas and religious precepts to be able to build community and to build harmony and to have good governance. Now, so in general, I think it is good to say that let us look at earlier communities in pre-colonial times, such as the Sokoto Caliphate, and see what lessons we can learn, which may be helpful building our modern community. The only thing I would like to say is that I think in this kind of discussion, a periodization is very useful. We need to clearly distinguish the time of the Shehus, the Muhammad Bello, and the Abdullahi from the period of the late 1800s, say 30 to 20 years before the British conquered the territory. Obviously, things had changed a lot, and there were remarkable deviations from the ways in which the founders of the caliphate tried to govern the caliphate on those very important principles. Towards before the coming of the British, particularly in the last 30 years of that period, there were so many things. For example, some of the leaders became more preoccupied rather than building communities, but using force. And somebody mentioned slave trading. If you recall some of the things that Ibrahim Nagwamase, for example, did in the frontiers of the caliphate, those created tremendous challenges subsequently in terms of not even being able to defend the caliphate against the conquest by the British. So I think we need to realize that there were very good periods and there are a lot of things to learn from that good period, the early phase. But we have to recognize that with time, there were remarkable deviations which contributed to even the conquest of the caliphate. Secondly, I think Professor Bunza, you know more of the history than any one of us, but perhaps you need to rethink the issue of saying that there was no civil war. I think virtually all the scholars are saying there was a civil war in fact, if nowhere else. And I will be very interested, maybe even in private discussions, to know how you came to the conclusion that there was no civil war in Kano. I must say that in spite of these few comments, frankly, I was very excited listening to your presentation. I look forward to getting a copy and reading it even more closely. Maybe I may not have read some of the questions or
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And
Thank you, sir.
It's a very commendable effort. Please continue with it.
Yes, sir.
The more we engage in these kinds of forums, the more we learn, and perhaps the better we will be in terms of generating ideas of how to keep on improving our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the commendation. And thank you for your contribution, sir.
Yes.
We're grateful.
Yes.
There is a question, and I would like Professor Isa Meshanu to get ready. We may invite him to say a word or two. But there is a question that I would like Professor Bunza to answer.
Yes.
From Shahid Abdurrauf Bolaji.
Okay.
Please, what do you have to say on some literatures that believe the Sheikh Danfodio struggle is more of political than reforming religion as claimed? And a very good example on that note was a conquest of Zaria even on Salah Day on Eidul ground. And history has it that Zaria had long accepted Sheikh reformation of Islam, but Sheikh later waged war against Zaria. This is a question from Shahid Bolaji. Professor Bunza, did you hear the question?
I did get it.
Okay. We will also give Professor Mansour some few words to say something, but just answer this first.
I think it's very important to first thank my teacher, Professor Jega, for raising these very important issues. I know deliberately this issue of civil war because, you know, we have even a book which is called Kano Civil War, written by a well-respected father of ours. So consciously, I started thinking about the concept of civil war as we perceive it today, as well as it was perceived then. What I was saying on the issue of civil war, expression of displeasure or refusing to accept an imposition, in my opinion, is part and parcel of liberality, which is a Sokoto Caliphate institutionalized from the beginning. Abdullahi, like I said, differed and disagreed with Shaw in several other issues, including very sensitive issue of Caliphate's attack on Borno. Sheikh Abdullahi refused. And he said all the reasons put forward and evidence put forward by by Shehu and Muhammad Bello were not supportive enough, were not authority enough to warrant the attack. So we argued elsewhere that there was the ability, there was initiative by the Caliphate to first and foremost open up the horizon of thinking of people, removing them away from uncritical attachment to mazahib, to scholars, and trying to not to demonize, but to people to have freedom of speech, freedom of thinking, and freedom of aspiration and perception. So in my opinion, I'm not saying that in the context of where you think the definition of civil war, one can, is a subject, but my thinking is that what happened there was expression of freedom of people to reject what they thought was wrong in their own opinion. And that was exactly what Sokoto Caliphate wanted them to do. And on the periodization, yes, of course, we know in every system, not only in Sokoto Caliphate, in all other systems, with those who were opportuned to inherit the land, to inherit the wealth, in spite of the fact that quite a number of literature that gave account of the leadership, especially at the time of colonial occupation, were colonialists themselves, especially the account given by explorers, as well as Lord Lugard and other European proconsuls. So we analyzed most of their statements, and we compared, for corroboration's sake, between their comments on some issues that were already established and also their own motives. So we found that there were really exaggerations. If during the time of Aliu Baba and those who followed after him, especially up to the end of 1800, that is up to the beginning, early end of 1800 is 1860s, 1870s. Professor Muhammad Kari Muhammad provided us some accounts of the encounters of Aliu Baba, as well as some of his successors. Each Sultan and the Sarki Muslimi will be assessed by his performance. And the same mechanisms for checks and balances, as well as for checking the excesses of leaders, were said to be in existence up to 1860s. During the time of Aliu Baba, for example, he was drafted for impeachment. Why will he be impeached? They accuse him of 5 things. 1, not leading the jihad by himself, because there was luxury, power, wealth, and other things. So he started delegating instead of leading, as the tradition of the Sokoto Caliphate, for the Sultan to lead the army himself and to go to the battlefield. 2, his neglect for taking care of the mosques. His neglect for, using the state resources for social services and several other things. So, so he was to be impeached. Only that he accepted the call. He appeared before the panel of investigation, and he, took pledge to repent and reform. And that was how he escaped impeachment. So what we are saying, really, this issue of periodization, the very much ideal, was really the time of Shehu and his immediate followers, and laxity and the other things really followed, but not to the extent of what we found in most of the writings, especially in the dual mandate and writings of Lady Lugard and the other, Europeans. because we also found documents, especially in the National Archives, Kaduna, where the Europeans themselves were trying to induce, to incite, one tribe against the other in order to cause civil unrest, to cause civil war. Because what is they realized, the harmony that was achieved remained and it was retained in the caliphate. So they wanted to create a civil war, just the same as they created Yoruba civil war. After Yoruba ethnic entities fought themselves, then they were simply and easily occupied by the British. So they wanted to do the same. So they incited the Hausa against the Fulani. That look, Hausa, you are the rulers, you are Kada. So they tried to incite, but they did not succeed. So the records we have show that they worked very seriously in order to see to the downfall of the caliphate using several other means. So most of their accounts were really not very reliable, but we cannot deny their, the account. Outrightly, but
okay. Time is actually going. Let me give thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Professor Bunza.
Yes, on this.
Okay.
Yes, going to issue of where's the political nature of jihad. This is a very, very contentious and debatable, subject, which unfortunately, most of the literature we have regarding this Sokoto Caliphate of Ibrahim Suleiman, hardly one will find book written, single author, written by non-European. So the issue of political nature, that it was a political, by that definition, what they wanted to say was that it was a war or it was a jihad that was fought with the aim of, climbing to the ladder of power, and that's all. They also cited examples of why he said that. Almost all the flag bearers were Fulani, with the exception of very few. That's we attempted to address. And also this issue of conquest of Zaria, conquest of Kebbi, conquest of some other area, states that identified with the caliphate. It's very, very clear what happened.
Okay.
Very, very clear.
Okay.
One, it is important, especially by our brother, Professor Bolaji, to understand that Islam itself is political. Islam itself in its nature is political. So the jihad was purely religious political. Bringing power to succumb to the will of Allah is political and it's religious. So what happened in Zaria, what happened in Kebbi, for example, who identified and accepted the jihad early, whether there was a renegation. Earlier, Malam Musa accepted. Sultan Muhammad Bello, who led, never fought Malam Musa. The same way as Umar Ukar accepted in Kebbi, he was not fought by the caliphate, but what happened was that there was a reverse. The earlier one accepted, those who followed, turned against the ideal of the jihad. So there was intervention in order to bring the emirate or the state back to the fold of the ideals of the caliphate. For example, many historians also quoted, like he made mention of Zazzau. Why was it that? As early as 1803, before the days of Sarkin Kabi Suleiman, he accepted the calls of Shehu. He invited his children and said that they should also accept it. They should also accept, and they accepted. So how on earth, after just 2 years, less than 2 years, then the state was, attacked again. So the problem was there was a renegation, a reverse. They first identified with the ideals of the jihad and they were allowed, and later they turned against it and they were brought back. And when they were brought back, the power was not given to any other person, for example, apart from those who fought for it or for the ideals of the jihad in those areas. So it's very clear the issue of political nature of the jihad is very sensitive and a very topical issue of discussion. We address that in several other areas, which I think our brother Bolaji would benefit from. We got even the letters that were written, appointment letters given by the Usmanu Danfodio to the flag bearers. We read the content of the jihad, of the letters of appointment. We identified, what were the responsibilities enshrined there for them to, to work upon. So in my opinion, yes, don't deny the political nature of the jihad. It's really political, but political Islamic. That's my little contribution on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. We give last chance to Professor Mansour. Once he makes his comments, we will have to close the lecture. We have taken more than an hour now. I mean, almost getting to 2 hours now. So Professor Mansour, Sokoto, I hope he hasn't left.
Yes.
Unmute Professor Mansour.
Yes, he's unmuted, but it's like he has a challenge with his network from his side.
Yana nan bai tafi ba?
Yes, sir. But his network is very weak. I can see his network is weak.
Professor Mansour.
Assalamu alaikum.
Yeah, it's coming up.
Shall I continue? I say, shall I continue?
Hey.
Yes, I can continue.
Okay, let me first of all join others in congratulating the organizers of this discussion and sincerely thank the speaker for giving this outstanding lecture, even though I joined the session relatively late. But I appreciate the thoughts shared to us by the speaker. May Allah reward him abundantly. I'll just comment on one issue raised by the speaker, which is the policy adopted by Sultan Muhammad Bello and the Sokoto Caliphate in general, by carrying the ulama along in the issues of state policies with special reference to the security of the nation. We all know that in Islam, ulama are the other wing of ulul amr, who are to guide all the activities concerning the ummah. So the contribution of ulama in the history of ummah in general is highly appreciable, and no doubt that the involvement of ulama in the Sokoto Caliphate policies is a memorable one. There is no any surprise in this, because the caliphs themselves were also ulama. Now, in our context of politics and administration, the religious leaders, as well as the cultural or other traditional leaders, are not involved neither in creating the policies nor in executing them. And I think it is from there that we start to get things wrong, especially when we talk about security. The Muslim scholars are very close to the people. They are held in high esteem and regard, and therefore their words are taken with admiration. Now, my humble suggestion to those who are concerned is, number one, let the ulama be aware of all the policies and implementation strategies adopted by government, and if possible, involve them in these policies, have their ideas and consent before taking any practical action. Number two, use the ulama in disseminating the government ideas and policies, put them in a position to sensitize the people so as to carry everybody along. And then they should be accorded with some sort of authority, just like what the Prophet ﷺ did to Abu Sufyan radiallahu anh, when he announced that Man dakhala dara Abi Sufyan fahuwa amin. Whoever entered into Abu Sufyan's house is secured. By adopting this kind of policy, by giving them that right, the authorities will get their full cooperation in achieving their objectives. So much thanks to the organizers of this discussion. May Allah continue to bless you. And I hope the notes of the speaker, or rather the full lecture, will be shared to all the attendants. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you so much, Professor Mansour, for this enriching intervention. Jazakallahu khairan. I would like to bring an end to this discussion, to this lecture, and by thanking, first of all, the presenter, Professor Mukhtar Umar Bunza, Honorable Commissioner for Higher Education, Kebbi State. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the knowledge you have shared with us. Thank you for all the very insightful perspectives that you have presented. We have really benefited, and we are glad that you have had a prepared paper which we can share with all those that participated. And Alhamdulillah, I'm glad to inform our participants that His Eminence the Sultan has hinted us that if all the papers that are presented in this series will be put together in writing, they can be put together and be published as a book. This is very encouraging. So we're glad that Professor Bunza
Alaikum, the moderator, are you with us? Assalamu alaikum. It's like we have lost connection with the moderator. Inshallah, as soon as he's back, we'll continue and round off the program.
May I also use this opportunity to especially and particularly express our appreciation to Alhaji Ahmad Dasuki, who has joined us all the way from Ghana. In case Alhaji Ahmad Dasuki has left, I would like either Imam Saeed Mukhtar from Ghana or Bashir to convey our appreciation to Alhaji Ahmad Dasuki for participating with us in this program. Thank you so much to all the participants for your time and your patience. Please endeavor to join us next week and in other subsequent weeks where we'll make presentations on Sokoto Caliphate, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala. The next presentation is going to be on leadership values and good governance in the perspective of the Sokoto Caliphate leaders. So please do join us next Thursday, inshallah tabaraka wa ta'ala, here. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik. Nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta. Nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.